morning, Kevin, or good afternoon to you. I heard so many great things from you about from Steve Lewis. Now, when I was lucky enough to work for Steve Lewis, and when Steve says that guy is good, that guy is good. So you guys are on. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Francis. Very good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Francis. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate that. My name is Brad Gilley, and I'm honestly thrilled to be moderating this particular session for Online Race Industry Week because, this is something I certainly believe in is such an integral and important part of racing. And what K1 RaceGear has to offer is absolutely products that any racer of any discipline can use. And for me, part of my background in another life, I used to run a racing series throughout Texas and sell race cars and everything else. And anytime I sold a race car, anytime anyone came in, the first thing I told them was the first money you should spend is always on safety. You can go fast later. First money you should spend is always on safety. But our panelist here today, J.R. Twett, the general manager of K1 RaceGear, also Kevin Swindell, a four-time consecutive Chili Bowls national champion. And J.R., let me start with you. K1 RaceGear, it says in your bio here at EPARTRADE.com, provides the highest level of safety gear and products to racers that we ourselves would be proud to use. So give us a little bit of an overview of what you do.
Well, certainly. I mean, that's sort of our launching point in our model and our credos. If we won't wear it, why should we expect anybody else to wear it? The company's been around for we're coming up on 15 years. Primarily was started as a go-karting gear company to supply our parent company's indoor go-karting tracks with K1 Speed. Quickly developed into being able to supply the specific market, the United States, with grassroots racing with quality product. But we've sort of morphed into something else, I think, which is sort of what lends to our popularity now is that I joke all the time about my people and why we've become so successful lately is that I truly think I got the best people in the world working for us. And I joke with them all the time that I'm the dumbest guy in the room. That's the key to our success, and it's the key to having relationships with people like Kevin and some of our other ambassadors that run our stuff. Is that we listen to race car drivers. We've been race car drivers ourselves, and we have a pretty good idea of what we're doing and what we want. But I think the norm, in the history of racing gear has always been to be, well, here's what we know that you need and what you want, and here's what you're going to wear. We come at it from a completely different angle, and I think that's where our popularity has come from. Certainly where our growth has come from lately. And, that's, I think that's what's launched our success recently.
Yeah, well, I will say, for racers understand racers better than anybody, and I think that helps in a big way. Kevin Swindell, want to bring you on as someone who literally was born into racing and has done it in so many different disciplines with a wide degree of success as well. Can you speak to K1 and your relationship with them?
It's been good. We kind of came into it, after obviously, I had stopped racing. But yeah, like, JR said, a lot of, what I liked about it was the fact that, he's willing to morph and move and work on things. And, I've kind of always felt like I really was in tune with what, I needed and trying to, grow things and innovate things when I was racing and, try to make stuff better. And I was always very conscious of comfort and safety and things like that. And, being able to work with somebody like him that's willing to kind of, move around, make things better, listen to guys like me or the guys racing now, obviously. So, it's been a good relationship, and, his stuff, has been good for us as well as, we've kind of built a brand around, designing things and being kind of a cool factor, I think, within, our side of the world. It's been, good to work with him and be able to, design suits for guys and kind of do some things a little differently. And, but yeah, it's been a great relationship so far.
By the way, I do want to remind you, if you've got a question for either JR or Kevin, you can ask that in the chat. Just type it in and we'll be more than happy to ask them for you as well. And talking about growing a company, you know, I mean, people say, obviously, if you're not moving forward, then you're definitely moving backwards. And JR, you guys have moved forward at a very rapid pace, a lot of growth, a lot of gains in the industry. How has this been done in such a short period of time?
Pure luck, nothing else. It's interesting with Francis and certainly with John and all you guys in this relationship is that to talk about this year specifically, there is a little bit of luck involved, but again, this goes back to me being the dumbest guy in the room, but I guessed at something with our growth, and the industry was prime for us, and we were anticipating a massive amount of growth. But we also, I come from a machinist background. I grew up in a machine shop. My father used to develop turbines and gears for Boeing. When we lived up in the Pacific Northwest, I grew up in doing piecemeal work, and so I've seen growth at a very young age. Not that either industry is the same, but at the same time, it's EPARTRADE, for example. Knowing that virtual connection is the wave of the future, right? And I think nobody's doing it better than EPARTRADE is currently. And that's, I would say that even if we weren't on camera with all these people. And I've told Judy before, I think that's why I jumped on so soon, is that I feel that that's the next natural progression in what we're doing here. When we talk about natural progression, I mean, K1 was just ready for it. We didn't always have the best stuff when I first came in. And I know that, we spent a lot of time, an extraordinary amount of money researching textiles. All of our textiles come out of France and Italy. We've worked diligently with textile manufacturers over there to, the industry is always going to move towards lighter weight, stronger materials. It's natural in anything. You got to be careful with that, certainly in safety gear. And, which, has never been more in the spotlight than this last week, with some of the things that have happened in F1 and NASCAR, certainly. And we were primed and ready for it. And our segment of the market being primarily in the US and in grassroots racing, we anticipated a massive amount of growth. We were ready for it, and we built a ton of personal relationships just with groundwork that we did at racetracks. My people are always at racetracks. You will always find K1 at a racetrack somewhere. We live it. We live the brand. There's just no denying how we got to where we were. But in order to stay relevant, you got to still do the brick and mortar stuff. You got to keep a good foundation. We've got a great parent company in K1 Speed who's got our back in anything that we want to do. And we are constantly in research and development to progress and not forget about safety. And so I think that, on top of that, the personal relationships that I've developed and my team has developed with drivers, much to mine and my wife's frustration at times on a Sunday night at 10:30, they all have my phone number. They know that I'll answer. And, it's a personal relationship that we've developed with racers and with the industry as a whole. And it's, you can't buy that.
Kevin, I want to ask you this question before I ask JR. So it'll be a similar question to both of you, but from a racer's standpoint, from an end user standpoint and everything that you've done, what was different about K1 and how they do things that attracted you?
I think the first thing, was more so that, you go to a lot of these higher end places and stuff it's expensive. And, what you can get with him is, what any of these guys like a Kyle Larson or somebody is wearing, and get it for your kid. Like there's no difference. There's no higher in this. There's no locked out of being able to get a hold of this, this style or anything else. And, on top of, being able to constantly work to make it better and not stay stuck in the mud as far as, some of these things, was a lot of it. And just being able to be a part of, some of those kind of technical decisions and working on things. And, you know, we're talking about the shape of the belt the other day of how to make stuff look better and function better. And, you know, was just able to bring my opinions and be heard, you know, was the biggest thing for me. But yeah, I think, you know, ultimately it really was the fact that you know, you can put your kid in the nicest stuff, the lightest stuff possible, and not break the bank. And, you know, it's, I think, like when we open this conversation about, you know, buying safety before you buy, you know, speed, it's kind of the same thing when it comes to seats and things like that. Sometimes, like, some of these people will go in and really skimp on things that really should not be skimped on. And, you know, I think he puts you in a position to be able to, you know, to really keep your, you know, your kid or your loved one safe.
Yeah, very well said. JR, for you, you had to set yourself apart, obviously, when you're getting into this. So what is it that sets K1 apart?
Nothing. As a racer and in our industry, nothing is more personal than race gear. I've known over the years, I worked on a lot of my cars and I built a lot of my own motors. So I think I might come at it from a little bit different perspective, but I always knew what piston was in my car. I always knew what rings I was running. I knew what gear we were running. I knew what brand all these were. I wouldn't say I didn't care about them, but I relied on them from a history of knowing, well, I broke that didn't work, so I use this, and relied on, you know, a number of guys in the industry that taught me better things about cylinder heads and how these things work. But I never had a real personal connection to parts. Your fire suit and your underwear and your shoes and your gloves, are in your helmet specifically, they're very personal to a race car driver. And yeah, I go back to what I said earlier, and no names need to be mentioned as far as our competitors. I love them all. I love the competition. But the industry went towards, we know what's best for you. Here's what's available, and you're going to wear this. Okay. I mean, I wore that stuff growing up and when I was a kid and getting started. And then throughout my, you know, small career, I was a better businessman than I was a driver. So I realized that quick. I wasn't a Kevin Swindell or any of the others. But I remember that it was like, you know, I could walk up my hauler and be like, don't touch my gloves. You know, don't, I don't care if you mess around with a piston pin or a rod or something. Look all you want. Just leave my gloves alone. Don't touch my fire suit. Race gear is vital in its to its core because of what it offers, you know, and its protection, whether it's your head, it's your hands, or your body. But it's very, very personal. And I think that I don't say my whole team, we do that better than anybody in the industry, is bring that personal effect to race gear. We know that what Kevin tells me is going to work may not work for a Kyle Larson or a Matt Crafton or whoever it is that's in there. And you constantly have about 15,000 voices in your head saying, this is what you should do to your stuff. And while I don't want to ignore it and say, okay, everybody's got to wear a generic brand, we try to take small bits of information from each of those things and each of those people and incorporate it into what we're doing. And we constantly are doing that. And that's something that just got forgot about for a long time from some of these legacy brands. And, you know, to go back to a little bit of what we were talking about, we just briefly touched on it with safety being real top of mind right now over the last week. And that's a great thing. There's a good and a bad to it. And my personal opinion is it's great that everybody's looking this past week at safety gear. The only bad part about it is that these kind of things happen across the country and across the world weekly, and nobody hears about it until it happens at F1 and NASCAR, which is okay. But I think what it also does is it allows some companies to be complacent. I've made it a goal in my life. It's a passion of mine, but it's also my goal to just never forget about, no matter how much personal branding we do, whether it's for a sponsor or for that driver wearing that brand, I won't do it if it's not safe. And that always has to be the first thing. So we just try not to be complacent at all. We keep constantly trying to evolve and make things better, you know, whether we're just the little engine, the little company that could going up against some of these giants, but we just take it really, really personal, very, very serious. And we still have fun with it, man. I mean, I feel like it's the coolest thing in the racing industry, because we get to not only keep people safe, but we get to design brands, and we get to put that stuff forward in the forefront. So I think we do that better than anybody, and that's what's kept us moving ahead so quickly.
Yeah, your passion for this absolutely shows through. And again, I do want to remind folks, if they have a question in the chat, they can certainly do so. Type it in. We'll ask them. In fact, Rick Young says, K1 makes amazing suits. They are the official suit of Rams Racing Chili Bowl team as well. So nice shout out from them.
Well, not only, Rick and Jeff and the guys over there at Rams have been, that's a testament to what we do. It's a personal thing. They can always rely on us, but at the end of the day, they know that they can rely on a safety gear company to keep their guys safe. But, if Rick calls me up and says, hey, I got this, we've got this, veterans community project that we're doing with guys. We really want them to be at the forefront of our operation. Not only do we want to run well at Chili Bowl, but we want to represent our sponsors. Man, I jump on that right away and go, let's make this veterans community project the best that it can possibly be and look the best it can possibly look. That's our passion. That's what we're going to keep doing.
Kevin, I want to ask you, when it comes to safety gear and the different types of safety gear, and certainly I want to talk to you about this too, JR, but with the different disciplines of racing that you've done, from sprint cars to stock cars and many other things as well, different types of safety gear goes along with each of those different types of racing. What do you say to racers who are looking to move up but think, well, I've already got a fire suit, but now I'm going to go from a sprint car to a stock car?
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff, obviously carries over pretty well. There's not a lot of things that change too much. I think as you go through some of the stuff that spend more time in the car, the longer races, you run into some ventilation things and some hoses going through the suits. But, overall, a lot of times something that I wore in a sprint car, I wore, in a cup car, it really didn't change. So, I mean, as far as, suits and gloves and things go, as long as they hit that SFI rating, I think it's just up to you if you want to have dirt on your stuff when you go sit in the stock car or not. So, like I said before, JR makes a great product and things, and, nothing seems to, end up stained or messy or anything dumb happens with things. And, as long as, stuff doesn't have threads coming out of it or something where you think you're going to look bad to you, to your higher up sponsors like that, I think it's, it's something that, you don't worry about it. As long as you make something nice on the front side, it carries over well to either.
That's a good thing. JR, how about it for you? I mean, what works for karting might not work for, bigger cars, or some people have different styles they prefer. They might want to have the tight cups around their ankles, or they might want to have the cups go past their shoes and all of that. So talk about the variety of products that you guys do have.
Yeah, certainly. Like I said, we came into the market as a go-karting supplier, and not to bore the entire audience with how these things are manufactured, but you inherently, when you're going to do one, you got to do the other. And if you're only going to do one well, meaning karting, and not do automotive stuff, we do well in an industry of go-karting that's that's this big versus an automotive industry that's this big. You don't need to pay less attention to one over the other, certainly. But yeah, starting with go-karting, your abrasion resistance. I think the biggest difference when people are making the jump and what they need to know is that not all suits are made or created equally, and you should do your research, especially when it comes to kids. Because I've been too many places and seen, in an outlaw kart or in a micro or something where I go, wow, that's a go-karting suit that guy's wearing. That's somebody needs to go over there, and I have no problem doing it. I'll go over and tell a parent, don't do that. We're here for a reason, and we supply these things for a reason. So I think it's what Kevin was saying, we do different things, but I think the good thing is that we're doing them well enough that even somebody like Kevin Swindell, who knows quite a bit about them, doesn't recognize it. Because what goes back to what he said earlier, I will put a 8-year-old, box stock kid in the same suit as Kyle Larson if that's what his parents want, and it's available, and I will do that, and we'll do it at a reasonable price. nobody should be wearing less of a safety gear and apparel than the next guy. I don't care who they are, so, the changes, it's, I mean, man, I could talk to you for hours about the different textiles that are available. But at the end of the day, I think it really just boils down to, we manufacture every single suit, whether it's a 5-year-old getting in a go-kart or to a SFI 20 top fuel racer who's almost guaranteed going to test your product out. We build them the same way.
How does someone, when it comes to the turnaround, obviously people are changing sponsors, things are evolving and all of that. If I have very specific needs to me and a very specific design that I want, how long does something like that take?
Typically, we've got one of the shortest turnaround times as far as custom suits, because we're primarily a custom suit company. Typically, we're running during slow season about 4 weeks. When it gets into peak, right after, just shortly after Chili Bowl, we'll probably be right in that 6 to 7 week turnaround time. And that's from, the minute that design is approved, we've got measurements and logo files and everything, and we go. So it's, we've kept that time down. We understand people need to get to races. You're never going to rely on a race car driver to get you stuff timely. So we expect that, we know that. So we've adjusted our business model and our manufacturing capabilities to keep up with it.
And how about design? I mean, I know some people may come to you with, this is exactly what I want, and some people may not have any kind of an idea. Can you help with all that?
Yeah, I think one of the big advantages to K1 RaceGear and our abilities is also what we will do, within reason. If it's safe, we will do it. We do everything. When we say custom suits and custom designs, we truly mean custom suits and custom designs. We're not going to grab one of our standard suits off the wall, change the colors of it and slap logos on it and call it a custom suit. That's not a custom suit. So we are the quintessential custom suit manufacturer, in that we, from the toe up, we do it completely custom. We get a lot of stuff that is not reasonable. You'll get a picture of a car that a guy will send you and say, make this. Okay. Yeah, we've seen that, and we understand what people want, but we're also pretty good at functionality first, guys. If we can make this suit, we will. If it's not going to function right, we're not going to do that. So, we're doing really well at sort of schooling people as to what shouldn't be done, how far you can go with custom suits, but still making something custom and making it personal.
Kevin, on the racer end of things, being able to go to one place, literally one-stop shopping for everything that you need on safety, how important is that?
It's simple, and that's what, like you said before, a lot of this comes down to relationships. And, for me, it was always, it's easier once you get comfortable with a guy. And sometimes it's hard to get comfortable with, somebody that works at these places, and having that relationship where you can kind of just send a text or send something simple and say, this is what I need, or this is what I want, as opposed to, trying to kind of, feel like you're going through customer service with some places. So, having a direct relationship, with these guys, and being able to get every piece of the puzzle, from your bag to your socks to, a lot of the little things are things that complicate. The soup stuff, is simple, and it kind of comes down to, being able to talk with a designer, and that part gets done. And usually you spend a lot of time in one suit, but it's the little things, when you lose a sock or a shoe disappears, or, something gets covered in something and messed up, that you need something quick, and being able to, get a hold of those guys and do things, quickly and simply. And, a lot of us are, I feel like a lot of the drivers tend to be almost kind of shy when it comes to some of this stuff about speaking up some of the time and trying to do it. And we'll suffer through some dumb stuff, or, even, just grab something old off the shelf, as opposed to trying to make a complication through some of this stuff. So, just being comfortable with, with the people you're dealing with, and having all those pieces right there without having to go, here for something and there for something. It definitely simplifies everything.
We got a question from the chat, JR, and this may be more just little more broad as far as an SFI rating or something like that goes. But the question comes from Yules Garcia. It says, how many seconds, more or less, a K1 two-layer protects at 700 Celsius in comparison with the competitor brands, and as it happened with Romain Grosjean this past week?
Yeah, certainly. It's a good question. You know, it comes down to the layers that you build a suit out of. And obviously anything that's off the shelf or that we customize goes through both, on most of our gear, goes through both SFI and FIA testing. They both have different rules and different standards that they set as far as heat, penetration, flammability testing, and things like that. Typically on a two-layer suit, like you would see, you know, somebody from Chili Bowl run, what I would assume the A-Star suit that Grosjean was wearing, what they'll have is they'll have a TPP rating. And I think that the question is sort of leading towards this, is like, what does necessarily that TPP rating mean? That's a thermal protection barrier of your suit. And whenever you look at a number, you'll see a TPP rating and it'll have a number next to it. The way it's defined by the SFI Foundation, which is the standard here in the United States, and it's very similar at FIA, is that if you divide that number by 2, that's the amount of seconds that you can be on fire, engulfed in flames, before you sustain a second-degree burn. So typically our testing, and all this stuff is quoted on the SFI Foundations and everything with their testing as to what the TPP rating is for each different item. You will see generally our suits are going to run between, I think the minimum at SFI is 19, which gives you, 8 to 10 seconds of being on fire, whereas most of our stuff with an inner lining is running between 25 and 30 TPP, which is, you're talking about between 12 and 15 seconds. Now, let me expand on that just a tiny bit here too. And Kevin can certainly answer some questions on this also. The way you test in a vacuum, we'd all understand if you thought about it, is not necessarily the way it's going to happen in a vehicle, right? You've got an isolated room where you've got these patches that we supply with our layers that are tested to a certain degree of Celsius for penetration, heat penetration, deflection, all these things. That's all great. It gives you a pretty good idea of how well those layers work. The difference between being engulfed in a flame, whether it's in a capsule or running through fire, is certainly a lot different if you're in a closed cockpit in an open wheel car, or in like Kevin's situation that he's been in more than once, I know, with fuel leaks. Oftentimes what you'll see in a sprint car and in midget racing is where a fuel line will come off. This happens a lot, or a fuel leak where the fibers of the suit are actually drenched in a volatile, flammable substance, and the slightest thing that lights that up. So you're going to see a different result as far as how long that suit typically could stay on fire and sustain a second-degree burn versus somebody who is engulfed. Now, none of us can really guess at what was going on at the point of flame on the Haas F1 car with Grosjean, because, it was a terrible thing to see, but it was also, we couldn't necessarily see what was going on in the cockpit or him climbing out until he came up over the edge. So hard to say. What I will say is I'll applaud Alpine Stars. Sparko had a couple of scary ones also. We're all doing our job. Everybody is using good textiles, and that's good to see when, especially in these cars that don't typically see a lot of fire. I know we see it quite a bit. We've unfortunately had to test some materials in the last couple of years and had very good results. But to say that about the TPP rating and what is factual in a vacuum environment where they test it, I've had drivers that have called me and said, "Hey man, I was on fire for 25, 30 seconds in your lightest weight suit, and I had nothing. I don't have a single mark on me." I don't suggest anybody tries it. That's not the point. The point is being able to rely on manufacturers who utilize layers and technology that's on par with what the top level teams are doing. So again, while they are a competition, I applaud that A-Stars kept Grosjean safe. Some of these top brands have clearly not rested on their laurels and been complacent. They've kept utilizing good materials, and that's all we can do, is just keep testing and keep utilizing good materials. But to go to his point, that sort of answers is, if you look at that TPP rating, All of ours pass SFI and FIA. We don't veer from those designs and layers once we get them tested, which has been a problem in the industry from others. So you can typically use that number as a starting point. I don't recommend anybody just rests on that number. Don't put all of your love into that number, because here's the biggest reason. I always encourage anybody who's wearing a 2-layer SFI or an FIA rated suit to also wear underwear. You know, we don't just make these underwear just because it's like soft and cute and you can have a custom logo on it or something. It has an added layer of protection that everybody should really focus on. I understand everybody wants to be cool in a race car. I get it, man. If you have a problem with it, you should probably have a different career. You're going to be hot, you know, but we try to get you the best layers possible without sacrificing any integrity. And that's why I always say underwear, man, it's a third layer. It's a protective barrier against your skin.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the underwear actually. And when you're talking about the TPP rating, does that add to it? You know, if you had one that's TPP of 19 and, you know, maybe the underwear is TPP of 10, I don't know. Does that make it 29 and then you divide that by 2? How does that work?
Yeah, well, I think it's difficult to quantify it as a whole number. I think it's added protection. Now, certainly each individual knitted Nomex underlayer and tech layer is tested on its own. Now, obviously the number is going to be way lower because you don't have a woven barrier that's the outer lining, right? So the outer barrier is the most important part. I would say the most important part, but it's certainly the one that's going to test the flame resistance the earliest. What you have on under those layers is certainly as important, if not more important, you know, as far as if you wear a 2 or 3 layer suit. But that added protection, you could quantify it that way if you want to, but I'm not going to, as a professional, tell you that it's going to be a 29 if you've got a 23 and a 6. What I'm going to say is that they each have their individual scores as far as a TPP rating would be concerned. And certainly adding them together is never a bad thing.
Kevin, how about you? You have any thoughts or opinions, especially with real world experience?
No, I mean, I think, you know, the hardest part some of the time is when you're younger, it's kind of, you look at certain things and maybe want to be tough or be cool about some of this stuff. And you trend away from, you know, the Nomex underwear and things like that. And, you know, I know as even going back to just like, you know, things like my dad didn't run a rock screen on a sprint car. So it was like rock screens aren't cool. So I didn't, you know, do that. It's, you know, and little things. I don't think, I mean, he wears Nomex shirts now finally, but I think it took until 5 or 6 years ago of him, you know, obviously getting a lot more comfortable before he left a t-shirt, you know, so I kind of followed that path as well. And I think it was a good thing that they started putting logos on them and made them cool, because that made them a little bit cooler in some of these kids' eyes that they could wear something neat, and it got another layer. And, you know, I talked to somebody the other day about it, and he's like, I don't want Nomex. I just wear a t-shirt. It was just like, so, you know, I got to a point to where I felt naked if I didn't have long bottoms and a long sleeve top on. And, you know, I went through phases of kind of adding one piece in, and I went from a short sleeve shirt to a long sleeve shirt. And yeah, I just think kind of if you suck it up on some of this stuff for the first time and do it, you realize that a lot of this stuff is actually really comfortable, and it actually makes stuff better. And, you know, to me, guys talk about being hotter, but I never felt like I was any hotter with a long sleeve shirt versus short sleeve shirt. Or if anything, I feel like some of that stuff kind of plays into the way, like, you know, football players look at it, to where it's like you hold your sweat in, it almost keeps you cooler. So, yeah, I think, you know, it's just educating some of these kids, and as dumb as it sounds, it's just trying to make some of this stuff cool. And you want to get some of these guys that they feel are cool to wear some of this stuff and realize how much of a role model to these guys they are. And to set a good example, I think is just a lot of the battle.
Yeah. Yeah. The cool thing is not being treated for burns in the hospital. JR.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that's the coolest thing. Let's be clear on that. You know, it's funny. It's kind of ironic that we have Kevin with us, even though we planned it, but to bring up Sammy for just a second, Swindell, obviously the legend, Kevin's father, who we learned a lot from, and we all did. But when we started talking about complacency and not necessarily testing and not necessarily where some people have rested on their laurels of the past and just said, oh, this is safe because somebody said it was safe, or SFI said it was safe. And they do rigorous testing on this, and they require us to do rigorous testing on it. But I was standing at Knoxville earlier this year, and Sammy doesn't give a lot as far as Kevin could tell you a ton of stories, but from my perspective, he doesn't give you a whole lot unless he likes you. And, him and I stood there and talked for about 2.5 hours. One of the greatest conversations I had with a race car driver in my life, probably because I've, been a fan and also, partnered with him now. But he made a comment to me that he goes, I'm probably single-handedly responsible for the way half of these drivers drive nowadays, or he said these kids drive nowadays. And I was expecting a completely different answer as to what he said next, because I was like, well, Sammy's been known to be a little rough from time to time, and, just out there wheeling it and getting it done and driving hard. And he was like, no, that's not, it's not. He said, we were the crash test dummies for the entire generation. We were the first guys that were true outlaws out there running from state to state. We were breaking stuff. We were figuring out, whether it's not running a rock screen or some sort of window net, whether it came to different gloves and stuff. Secretly, these guys were the ones that laid the foundation for what we built, what we are continuing to build. And he said, these kids just aren't scared anymore. They just don't, whether it's cool to not be scared, or it's cool to throw a slide job from half track, or it's cool to, whatever it is, they just don't have that fear and I feel like maybe we've softened these guys a little bit. And I don't know if that's to the detriment of our class of drivers that we have that are coming up. But to speak to what Kevin said, yeah, you do have to make stuff cool. You do have to make stuff safe. And I think I'll say it again, nobody does it better than K1.
Very well said. A couple of questions from the chat here. This sort of goes along some of what we were talking about when it comes to what you wear underneath your suit. Does the use of a chill out or cool shirt affect the efficiency of the suit with an opening in the pocket for the lines that have to come in for that? Is there a benefit to a Nomex shirt over the top of a cooling shirt?
Well, I guess there's a couple of different ways to answer that question. One is that if we start talking about the cooling tubes that enter, we primarily only see this in some sports car racing, but it's become more prominent in NASCAR racing, where these trucks and these cars are extremely hot, and you get into the hot part of the season in July, going to a place like Chicago or, even Daytona, run those road courses. I mean, it's extremely warm inside of these things. So they've started to develop these cool vests and cool shirts. In order to pump the cooling liquid through it, it has to go through the outer and inner layer. Before, that was always a no-no. We used to tell people all the time they would buy a suit off the shelf, and they would go, yeah, I'll just take it down to this lady and have my logo embroidered on it. You can. I don't recommend it, because essentially what you're doing is you are penetrating both layers. And, the last thing you want, I don't know how much you love your sponsors, but you don't want a tattoo of your sponsor on your skin. Okay. You don't want that. So SFI went through some testing to where we developed a certain size pocket on the torso of the suit that could gone through both layers and have the tubes go through, as long as it was secured with Kevlar thread and a Velcro latch that goes over it, so it is closed. Great stuff. I can't speak to whether, and I won't speak to whether or not wearing a cool vest or a cool shirt. I know that I can say with almost certainty, anybody that's running a cool shirt is probably not running a Nomex undershirt. Doesn't mean they shouldn't. But I would probably ask Kevin more than this, just because he's driven a race car more recent than I have, is to whether or not you're still going to have that added protection if you wear a Nomex layer underneath your suit. Whether or not somebody's going to venture that and say, you know what, I feel that I'm still going to be cool enough with a cool vest and a Nomex shirt over this with 2 layers of Nomex on top of it. My guess would be no.
What do you think, Kevin?
I've never really played with those shirts. I grew up with a lot of horror stories of the old guys, talking about them, not working, the water getting hot, a lot of things of the old days where when I think they were trying to develop them, that the guys had worse off moments than they really had gains. I know I see a lot of guys use them nowadays, so they've obviously gotten, a level of improvement. But yeah, I don't have a lot of experience really to comment too much on it. I could see maybe where, I don't know how you'd start to get into a level of thick that might disrupt how you fit in the seat that would stop you if you wanted to wear a shirt, then a cool shirt, then your suit. And, I think it would just kind of come down to comfort and things. And, that's another thing that shoots you in the foot a lot of times on a lot of the safety stuff is just the first thing you do if you don't fit in the seat or something squeezes you too much or this or that is you just take a piece of the safety stuff off.
Here's another. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, JR.
Yeah, just let me also note that remember that while some sanctioning bodies do require it, a lot don't require the use of a undershirt. Okay. That does not mean that the suit that you're wearing is not passing the certification needed to run that class. So I don't want it to be confused with his question that, well, if this guy's wearing a cool shirt underneath that, is he not legal? Is he not? That's not what anybody's saying. It's saying, I don't know to the level of driver comfort that they're going to get from wearing a cool shirt covered by a Nomex undershirt and then 2 layers of SFI 3.4 or 3.2A5, whatever it is, the series that they're running. I don't know how much comfort's in that, but I will say this, and I'll always go back to this, cool shirt or not, I recommend highly wearing underwear, Nomex underwear.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And Rick Young just put it in the chat. There are cool shirts that are made with Nomex, so you may not have to compromise and wear 2. Another question comes from Yules Garcia, and this maybe some people maybe misunderstand the maintenance and care of your suit. How many washings do the driver how many washings basically can you do on a suit before they start to lose the original protection properties? What's the reality of that?
So great question, because there's a little bit of confusion as to what fire resistance is and what Nomex is and the materials that we use for it. So typically entry-level suits, and these are, I feel like they're phasing out a bit because more people are going to double layer Nomex suits even at the younger entry level, and they should. That's great. But an SFI 1 rated suit is a single layer, not necessarily always a single layer, but it's an FR cotton that is treated with a fire resistant chemical. So if we were to answer Yule's question in regards to that, there is a certain amount of washes. Everybody's chemical is different. Everybody's FR cotton is a little bit different. Typically, 25 to 30 washes that you're seeing out there, you're going to start to lose protection on that, depending on how you wash something. There's a lot of great materials that are out there. There's a lot of great chemicals that are out there now. One of the brands that we recommend washing stuff in is Molecule. They're a company that's done a tremendous amount of work to develop a detergent that is not caustic or harmful to the actual threads or material, but it also offers a level of protection and barrier to some things with their protectant that they use. It's not so harsh that it starts washing away chemicals quickly. So that's the first part of the question. To answer the second part is when you get into Nomex, a common misconception in these days is that, oh, I can't wash Nomex too much because it's going to, well, if you treat your Nomex well, Nomex is an engineered fire resistant material. So it's not treated with a chemical. The fibers themselves have been manufactured by textile manufacturers to be inherently fire resistant. So do they lose some of their integrity over time? Certainly, but it also depends on the driver, and it also depends on the person maintaining them. I've seen guys that have to roll around in the dirt in their fire suits while they're working on their late models. You generally are not going to see that in a sports car, in a NASCAR, in a Cup Series car or a truck or even sprint cars to Some people are just hired drivers that get in and drive. They treat their stuff really well. If I was to recommend, and what we do recommend with our fire suits, and I won't speak for anybody else, is we recommend a cold wash on a gentle cycle with Nomex or FR cotton. We do not recommend dry cleaning suits. I know a lot of people do it. Dry cleaning uses chemicals to clean stuff. A lot of times you'll find pilling, what we call pilling on a Nomex suit, where they'll get little balls that come up after they've been dry cleaned. Cold wash, gentle cycle with a trusted detergent that's not caustic. I recommend Molecule. And hang dry them inside out of the sun. Sun can fade and damage Nomex as much as anything can. So I really highly recommend. I say this all the time. They're fireproof. They're not bulletproof. For some reason, people think that I'm wearing a fire resistant suit. It's the toughest thing in the world. They're actually rather delicate. It's, if you want them to last a long time, and importantly, look really good for your sponsors, keep them clean, keep them out of the sun, treat them gently.
Very well said. I think this is a question that should bring about a good answer and an educated one for a lot of people as well. But it says, do you guys recommend a single or 2-layer suit for beginner racers?
Well, this is always an interesting question from a parent, right? And I get this a lot. My people get this a lot. Well, I would imagine you want them to wear a 2-layer suit because they're more expensive and you make more money on them, right? And I get it, man. I have children of my own. And it's difficult, especially for kids and entry-level racers. And this may not be for a child, so I'll answer it in 2 parts. But for a child that's coming in, a parent going, man, spending $800 to $1,500 on a 2-layer Nomex suit, that's quite a bill to foot, considering that I'm probably going to buy him one by the end of the season and 2 or 3 more next year as he's growing. I get it. I totally get it. That's why we have different entry-level suits that we offer, whether they're single layer or 2-layer. From a dad standpoint and from a parent standpoint, and from somebody who sincerely cares about the protection of drivers, whether it's entry level or the top pro of pros, a 2-layer Nomex suit is how I'm always going to direct somebody to go, just because inherently it's more safe. That's not to say that a single layer doesn't fit somebody's budget, somebody's ability to jump into a car and start learning, a weekend warrior that does track days, a beginner box stock. These things are okay. I think that a parent or even a person getting into racing needs to you started off by saying this and you said it really well. Safety needs to be the absolute first thing that they look at, no matter what. Yeah, man, I just want to get in and go fast. I get it. We all do. Do your due diligence, research companies, research what those sanctioning bodies require. And my recommendation is always to go above and beyond, because you just don't know.
Well, I know we have just about a minute or 2 left here, JR and Kevin. Is there anything else that we might not have covered here that you want people to know about K1 RaceGear who are viewing here today?
Well, a couple of things. I think the first is probably, you can rely on us. You can trust us. We've been around. We've grown tremendously. If you can't tell by the field drivers that we have out there running our stuff right now, from the Swindells to the Kyle Larsons to the Matt Crafton and Chase Briscoes, it's custom suit season. Click on our website, go measure. One of the difficult things that we've had this year, and I jokingly have said this before to my team, is the last thing that I want is 5,000 race car drivers measuring themselves this year. And we're really missing out on an opportunity to be person to person, measuring people at trade shows. So one of the things I did want to get across, we've made a really, really great video, an interactive video with a lot of great instructions that tells you specifically how to measure yourself for a custom suit. That's one thing that I want out there. Another thing is I want to applaud our industry, and I want to applaud EPARTRADE and everybody that's involved in it, but our industry as a whole. I've said from the beginning, jokingly, but you want to get out of an economic slump, tell all the politicians and bureaucrats to get out of the way and let racers come in and do something. That sounds like a joke, but we're the most resilient industry that there is. We're the hardest working industry that there is. And man, we're just not going to give up. we're just going to keep digging. And we have had a banner year. It's been different. We've had to make some adjustments. We've got partners like EPARTRADE that's given us an opportunity to do things like this. I can't be more thankful. I know my entire team, says thank you for that also. I know that race car drivers, whether or not they're realizing it yet, it's a tough deal that we're going through. Everybody gets it, but nobody's done a better job than the racing industry and our industry as a whole to just say, man, whatever, we're going to be safe. We're going to do it safely. I know our partners at Knoxville Raceway and Daytona and all the racetracks that I've been to this year have done such an amazing job at adjusting to this current climate. But at the end of the day, racing ain't going nowhere. We're gonna be here. K1's not going nowhere. We're gonna keep our drivers safe. We're gonna be at racetracks. But do yourself a favor, go to K1 RaceGear.com, check out our video, check out the custom suit form stuff that's on there. Make sure you reach out to our trusted dealers. The Kevin Nouses of the world, the Swindell Speed Labs. We got a hardcore group of racers that we trust that help supply our custom designs to people. You can find a list of those on our website, social media assets and everything. But I really want to get that point across. Thank you to Francis. Thank you to Judy, John, yourself. What a tremendous job and a thing that you guys are doing right now, that giving us the opportunity and the vehicle to get these things across.
Well, thank you.
I'm into that, JR. I'm into that. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Registering on EPARTRADE is easy. Fill out your name, email, phone number, and create a secure password. Next, select your business type. Choose supplier if you're looking to display products or services and connect with buyers. Choose racing business if you're looking to find new parts and connect with suppliers. Choose race team if you own or are a member of a professional racing team. Begin typing your company name. We most likely already have your company in our database, which you can select from the drop-down. Then, enter your job title. Choose Claim Company if you'll be editing your company profile. Other members of your company can choose Join Company if they'd like to use EPARTRADE as well. You can view and agree to our terms of use here. If you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter, choose Accept. Click Register Now, and your registration will be submitted for approval. You'll need to confirm your email once it goes through. To keep our platform industry only, you'll be approved shortly after. If we require additional proof of business, we'll reach out. Welcome to EPARTRADE.